didn't murder a man in Portland over the weekend because they believe that's an effective way to combat systemic racism. You know, I was never a big fan of Howard Stern, but a while back I came across a video on YouTube of what happened on his show on September 11th, 2001. And it is one of the most serious and compelling things I have ever seen. You had a studio full of guys who were used to having fun on the radio who all of a sudden realized, okay, wait a minute, our country, our way of life was under attack. Let me tell you something. It is under attack again. What does it tell you? That Hillary Clinton has publicly announced that Joe Biden should not concede defeat in the presidential election under any circumstances. Now, one of the hallmarks of our constitutional republic has always been the peaceful transfer of power. And the person who was the Democrat nominee for president 4 years ago is now saying, the hell with that. Throw that out. We're not going to have a peaceful transfer of power. I don't care what anybody says. Too much is at stake here. Has this occurred to you? Have you thought about this? That once again, our republic, our very way of life, is under attack. Now, I plan to play the audio of Hillary saying that a little bit later, but first things first. The Democrat Party has been taken over by hardcore socialists. If you don't believe me, just go to Joe Biden's website. It's all there. But these socialists are endorsing violence because they believe might makes right, and desperate people sometimes do desperate things. Now, tomorrow is going to mark the 2-month anniversary of Democrats in the United States Senate refusing to support a non-binding resolution to condemn mob violence. Now, you might say, but Doc, I've seen Joe Biden and Kamala Harris come out and forcefully denounce violence recently. Well, sure, recently. You know why? Because Don Lemon said on CNN recently, the polls have begun to show American voters are concerned about violence in our streets recently. But Biden staffers have been raising a lot of money to bail rioters out of jail for months, and Kamala Harris has been publicly soliciting donations on social media to pay the bail of rioters for months. And they sure didn't condemn the violence 2 weeks ago at the Democratic National Convention, did they? And they still haven't specifically condemned the Marxist Antifa thugs and the Marxist Black Lives Matter organization. As the great Kimberly Strassel says over the Wall Street Journal, a Biden speech on violence in which he never once names BLM or Antifa. He instead calls out right-wing militants, white supremacists, vigilantes who infiltrate protests carrying weapons of war. Not like Biden actually wrote the speech, but you get the idea. Democrat mayors in big cities have clearly had their police on stand-down orders regarding Antifa and Black Lives Matter violence and rioters for quite some time now. For all Mark's listeners of Freedom 970 in Portland, you realize Antifa tried to burn down the building your mayor lives in last night, and he still won't ask President Trump for federal help to stop the rioting that has been going on in Portland for over 3 months. Now, I want to give you some examples of well-known Democrat politicians and entertainment figures encouraging violence. And then I want to play you some alarming video from Washington, D.C. from over the weekend that should have gotten the speaker arrested, but as far as I know, didn't, because Ms. Bowser is the mayor. All right, first of all, here is the montage, and I'll try to tell you who each one of the speakers is, of famous Democrats encouraging and endorsing violence, courtesy of the guys over at the Cauldron Pool. Let's see if I got the level right on this, guys. Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be.
MSNBC's Donnie Deutsch.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley on MSNBC.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Speaker Pelosi again.
Enemies of the state.
Chris Fredo Cuomo on CNN.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
It's in the First Amendment, Fredo Cuomo, the right of the people peaceably to assemble. I mean, you're just a licensed attorney with a law degree from Fordham, so I wouldn't expect you to be familiar with the United States Constitution. Former Attorney General Eric Holder.
When they go low, we kick.
Former George W. Bush and McCain staffer Nicole Wallace on MSNBC.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
Don Lemon on CNN.
Biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized right up to the right.
Nicole Wallace on MSNBC again.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
Robert De Niro.
I'd like to punch him in the face.
Joe Biden.
I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Netflix TV star David Harbour at the Academy Awards.
Punch some people in the face.
Johnny Depp.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
Never Trump grifter Rick Wilson.
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Broadway star Carol Cook.
Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him?
Madonna.
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Missouri State Senator Maria Chappelle Nadal.
A Missouri State Senator is under investigation by the Secret Service after saying she hopes President Trump is assassinated.
Maxine Waters.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
Auntie Maxine again.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Speaker Pelosi again.
And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Kamala Harris telling Stephen Colbert the rioting will continue even after Trump is reelected.
Everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't, they're not going to let up, and they should not.
Maxine Waters again.
If you think we're rallying now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Wow. You know, I got to tell you something. It sounds like they really mean it. Steve Scalise understands they really mean it. He was nearly killed when a 66-year-old Bernie Sanders fan showed up at a baseball field in Northern Virginia 3 summers ago, determined to murder as many Republican members of Congress as he could. Now, I want to know, have you heard this next piece of audio from over the weekend? This was in Washington, D.C., and the speaker here sounds serious, and I had to bleep out a whole lot of cuss words. But, I mean, this should get you arrested in any city of America, but it doesn't look like it did in the city where the mayor is Muriel Bowser. Check this out.
I'm at the point where I'm ready to put these police in the fucking grave. I'm at the point where I want to burn the White House down. I want to take it to the senators. I want to take it to the Congress. I want to take the fight to them. And at the end of the day, if they ain't gonna hear us, we burn them the f down. I'm one that talk real. I talk it in New York, and I talk it in D.C. The same way I police up in New York, I cops up here in D.C. The same way I bust police in the head in New York, I bust police in the head in D.C. Now, it's a lot of people, and I'm going to be honest, it's a lot of people that's on this front line. And one of the things that I always say, don't get on this front line if you ain't going to fight. Don't get on this front line if you ain't going to take no hit. Don't get on this front line when the police can push up, you push back. If you're going to front line and them racist, nasty, punk, fucking police is pushing up, you push the fuck up.
Now, my humble opinion, if D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser actually wanted her police officers to keep the peace, they would have arrested this guy on the spot. But as far as I can tell, that did not happen. Now, coming up, I've got a few words to say about George Floyd and some recent developments that have come up in the murder case on George Floyd, some things that, if you're tuning in for the first time in a while, you may not have heard. Again, if you want to get to the conversation, it's 877-381-3811. Doc Washburn filling in for the great one, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin.
Now, I know you love freedom. How do I know that? Because you listen to my show. And my show and everything I do is all about preserving freedom and the form of government that secures it for us. It's the same with Hillsdale College, one of the very best truly liberal arts colleges in the nation. That's why I talk about them all the time, because Hillsdale is committed to pursuing truth and defending liberty. Hillsdale teaches stellar students to defend freedom, no matter what they major in, whether it's science or music or economics or business, whatever. Hillsdale teaches them how to defend liberty. And they do that for you, too, through their free monthly digest of conservative thought. It's called Imprimis. 5.4 million Americans receive Imprimis for free every month. And you, my friend and fellow freedom lover, should be reading it too. You can subscribe for free at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com. There's no strings attached. Generous donors who want to preserve freedom for future generations make it possible for Hillsdale to send Imprimis to you for no cost every month. Start receiving and reading Imprimis so you can know how to defend the freedom you love. Go to levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com, levinforhillsdale.com.
All right, Doc Washburn filling in for the great one, Mark Levin. I want to turn now to George Floyd. When I first saw the video of Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin holding him down with his knee on his neck, I was horrified. I didn't understand what was going on. I heard George Floyd was saying, I can't breathe. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. But then, when the body cam video was leaked, showing George Floyd saying, I can't breathe while standing next to the police car and while he was in the back seat, I was like, okay, wait. Now, wait a minute. But have you heard the latest? The Hennepin County, Minnesota Medical Examiner's report finally came out last week and stated George Floyd was not killed by the police, but he actually died of an overdose of fentanyl. The report was dated June 1st, but apparently the authorities in Minnesota sat on it for like 3 months. Gee, I wonder why. Well, as former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel famously said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Now, Sarah Taylor over the Blaze has this bombshell. Defense attorney Eric J. Nelson, lawyer for former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, said the late George Floyd was the victim of a careless overdose rather than police homicide. Authorities charged Chauvin with murder in connection with George Floyd's May death, which stemmed from an altercation purportedly involving counterfeit money. In light of the allegations, Attorney Nelson is requesting a judge drop all charges against Chauvin, who has pleaded not guilty. An attorney for one of the other officers involved in Floyd's death also says body cam footage shows the moment Floyd reportedly ingested a lethal amount of drugs. Right there in the body cam. According to a Monday report from ABC News, Attorney Nelson filed a motion in Hennepin County, Minnesota District Court last Friday, alleging the prosecution has not shown probable cause and charging Chauvin with second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. In the motion, Chauvin's attorney insists the former police officer carried out Floyd's detainment by the book, including the use of a maximal restraint technique. Nelson said Chauvin believed the technique was necessary out of concern that Floyd could harm himself or Chauvin and his fellow officers during the detainment. Nelson has said that Chauvin and other responding officers were trying to help Floyd, who was clearly acting erratically during the detainment out of concern for the man and the possibility he might fall and strike his head, be hit by an oncoming vehicle on the road, and more. Nelson insisted the Minneapolis Police Department has approved training materials on such use of force, which shows an officer placing a knee on a subject's neck in order to subdue him. The motion also noted the autopsy on George Floyd concluded there was both fentanyl and methamphetamine in the late suspect's system, otherwise known as a speedball. George Floyd, who suffered from hypertensive heart disease as well as arteriosclerosis and hypertension, also reportedly was positive for COVID-19 at the time of his death. A portion of the motion read, put simply, Mr. Floyd could not breathe because he had ingested a lethal dose of fentanyl and possibly a speedball, combined with sickle cell trait, his pre-existing heart conditions. Mr. Floyd's use of fentanyl and methamphetamine most likely killed him. Adding fentanyl and methamphetamine to Mr. Floyd's existing health issues was tantamount to lighting a fuse on a bomb. Hennepin County Medical Examiner Dr. Andrew Baker also added that if George Floyd were found dead in any other circumstance, in this case home alone and no other apparent causes, this could be acceptable to call an overdose. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office ruled George Floyd's death a homicide, determining that he died because of cardiopulmonary arrest complicating law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression. But the autopsy report found no apparent bruising or trauma to Floyd's neck muscles, or back as a result of the restraint. Judge Peter Cahill will address Nelson's motion in a September 11th court hearing, according to ABC. But do you think the mainstream media is going to widely report on this? Of course not. You think Democrat politicians are going to say, oops, guess we goofed? Not a chance. But why would a Republican politician, a deep red state like Arkansas, continue to insist George Floyd was killed because he was black? I'll tell you why after the break. More coming up. Doc Washburn in for the great one, Mark Levin.
Now, I know you love freedom. How do I know that? Because you listen to my show. And my show and everything I do is all about preserving freedom and the form of government that secures it for us. It's the same with Hillsdale College, one of the very best truly liberal arts colleges in the nation. That's why I talk about them all the time, because Hillsdale is committed to pursuing truth and defending liberty. Hillsdale teaches stellar students to defend freedom, no matter what they major in, whether it's science or music or economics or business, whatever. Hillsdale teaches them how to defend liberty. And they do that for you, too, through their free monthly digest of conservative thought. It's called Imprimis. 5.4 million Americans receive Imprimis for free every month. And you, my friend and fellow freedom lover, should be reading it too. You can subscribe for free at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com. There's no strings attached. Generous donors who want to preserve freedom for future generations make it possible for Hillsdale to send Imprimis to you for no cost every month. Start receiving and reading Imprimis so you can know how to defend the freedom you love. Go to levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com, levinforhillsdale.com.
The Mark Levin Show, where we create the talking points. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
Hey, Doc Washburn in for the great one. In from Little Rock, Arkansas. Always an honor to be here. Always an honor to be here. So we're talking about the George Floyd situation. And talking about the fact that the medical examiner's report on George Floyd's death, dated June 1st, they finally released last week and saying, he actually wasn't killed by the police. He died of an overdose of fentanyl. So obviously the mainstream media is going to do their best to ignore this. Democrat politicians are going to do their best to ignore this. But why would a Republican politician in a deep red state like Arkansas continue to insist that George Floyd died because he was black. This is just the craziest thing, and I haven't been able to figure it out. In Arkansas, the state that I live in, it seems our governor agrees with Rahm Emanuel, the idea of not letting a good crisis go to waste. So, Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson recently announced he's going to push for hate crimes legislation for the state of Arkansas. Now, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, I don't agree with hate crimes myself. Hate crimes laws, that is. I think it'd be a much better idea to just, if somebody is found guilty of murdering somebody else, and, why should it matter? The skin color, religion, sexual preference, or whatever of the victim, or for that matter, of the perpetrator. If somebody is found guilty, and they, we got a legal system, so they go through all the appeals and everything. But why not just give them capital punishment for murdering somebody, whether the victim was white and the perpetrator was black, or is the other way around, or they're both white or they're both black, or whatever? Why should we have protected classes in America? I just think that's crazy. But when I heard that Arkansas Attorney General Leslie Rutledge stood up at the podium at the governor's hate crimes press conference and said this,
or when George Floyd was killed simply because he was black.
I was like, wait, what? Seriously? Okay, now, in case you're thinking, yeah, Doc, you're taking that out of context. That's only 4 seconds long. Okay, let me play it for you in context. It doesn't get any better than that. Let me make sure I got a little bit of volume on it. Okay, here we go.
When unspeakable crimes are committed against people, like when Robert Bowers targeted the Tree of Life synagogue, killing 11, wounding 6 others, including a law enforcement officer responding to the shooting. Or when George Floyd was killed simply because he was black. Or a 5-year-old Cannon Hinnant died simply because he was white. We must take action. Action is long overdue. These crimes cannot be tolerated, and we must send a clear message.
Okay, so Cannon Hinnant was the 5-year-old white boy in Wilson, North Carolina, who was allegedly murdered in cold blood by his next-door neighbor, who was a black man in his 20s. But the family said, this doesn't make any sense. We lived side by side peaceably for years. We can't imagine there's any racial component. So, I don't know. Maybe they'll figure that out at the trial. But when the medical examiner's report came out in Minnesota a few days after Leslie Rutledge said George Floyd was killed simply because he was black, and the medical examiner's report said George Floyd died of a fentanyl overdose, I contacted the Arkansas Attorney General's spokesperson to see if she was going to retract what she had said about the death of George Floyd. And the response I received was a resounding no. Seriously. The spokesperson for the Arkansas Attorney General recommended I refer to her earlier statements about George Floyd. The statements she made before the body cam video was released with George Floyd saying, I can't breathe while he's standing beside the police car. The statement she made before the medical examiner's report came out saying he died of a fentanyl overdose. The comments she made back when a lot of us still thought the police had killed George Floyd. Now, I find that remarkable. By the time Leslie Rutledge said George Floyd was killed simply because he was black, the body cam video was already out there. I can't breathe standing next to the police car. I can't breathe in the backseat of the police car. But the Attorney General of the state of Arkansas, the governor's designated representative to that wonderful RNC, we all saw on TV last week, and one of the two announced candidates for the Republican nomination for governor in 2022, continues to insist George Floyd was killed simply because he was black. I mean, at what? You're the top law enforcement officer of a particular state. Shouldn't you be supporting law enforcement to some extent? I mean, we all thought the police killed him at first, right? And now the evidence is rolling out, and we're all given pause, I would hope. Anyway, given the available evidence, I can certainly understand how a progressive liberal Democrat attorney general like Keith Ellison in Minnesota would want to continue prosecuting Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. What I simply cannot understand is how a Republican attorney general of a deep red state in Arkansas would cling to this assertion.
Or when George Floyd was killed simply because he was black.
Despite all the evidence to the contrary. Now, by the way, a lot of people are calling Kyle Rittenhouse a murderer. He's a 17-year-old guy who allegedly shot 3 people, killing 2 in Kenosha, Wisconsin over the weekend. The videos I've seen look like self-defense, but the courts will figure that all out. In the meantime, the great L. Lynn Wood, who represented falsely accused Olympic Park bomber Richard Jewell and falsely accused Covington High School student Nicholas Sandman in the defamation lawsuits, he's representing Kyle Rittenhouse. And I guess that doesn't sit well with some of the powers that be, because Twitter has now suspended the great Lynn Wood, who recently said on Twitter how careful he has been not to violate any of their terms of service. Remarkable, isn't it? Just remarkable. All right, 877-381-3811 if you would like to get on the program. Let me let's see if we can fit a couple of calls in here before the next break. Let me go with Chris in Frederick, Maryland. I'm sure listening on the great WMAL out of D.C. Chris, you're on the Mark Levin Show with Doc Washburn. What's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think we've sort of let the left define, and we need to somehow figure this out, but we've kind of let them define the value of life. You know, this life is more valuable than that life.
Yeah.
With abortion being legal since the 70s, and now, like you said, with hate crime legislation, which is basically just saying, well, you know, if you accost this person, then you should get a more severe sentence than if you accosted that person simply because of the color of their skin.
Right.
So I think we just need to take back somehow we need to redefine or define what the intrinsic value of life really is, because otherwise we're just basically operating off of the premise, like life is not valuable in the womb, life is more valuable if you're this skin color, if you're this skin color, you're protected, if you're this skin color, you're not. I mean, that's just basically, we're playing defense, the right, the conservatives, we're playing defense against all these arbitrary rules set up by the left, which,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, if you're a conservative Christian, you're looking to the Bible and how God defines the intrinsic value of all life, because we're all created in His image. But
absolutely,
the left, they say, okay, it's not important before you're born. When you pop out, if hundreds of years ago you were a slave and you're this skin color, well, now you're protected more than these people. I mean, it's just a you're operating on all these false premises, basically.
Yeah, and let me tell you why that is. There's something called the Frankfurt School, some hardcore socialists who were able to flee from Germany when Nazis, Hitler was taken over, and they came over, they got entrenched in Columbia University, and they came up with this idea of critical race theory and intersectionality, and that is being forced down our children's throats, not just in colleges and universities, but in public schools these days. And I'm wondering, Chris, if you think that one of the ways to fight back against this is this school choice idea that President Trump is really pushing for and hopes to enact once he gets reelected. I know Senator Tim Scott out of South Carolina has really been pushing for it too. In other words, children, of low-income families should not be forced into these government public schools.
I'm all for that, but at the same time, if all these schools, even in the, affluent neighborhoods, are being forced to teach a particular curriculum, or, everybody in the school just wants to teach.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say, Chris, before I run out of time here, is that, private schools shouldn't be forced to teach anything. And if we can really give the public schools some competition, that could change everything, and I certainly hope that it will. Chris, great call, brother. God bless you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. More of your calls coming up at 877-381-3811 as we talk about the Democrat-endorsed violence in our cities, and we look forward to election night, November 3rd. Doc Washburn filling in for the great one, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin.
Now, I know you love freedom. How do I know that? Because you listen to my show. And my show and everything I do is all about preserving freedom and the form of government that secures it for us. It's the same with Hillsdale College, one of the very best truly liberal arts colleges in the nation. That's why I talk about them all the time, because Hillsdale is committed to pursuing truth and defending liberty. Hillsdale teaches stellar students to defend freedom, no matter what they major in, whether it's science or music or economics or business, whatever. Hillsdale teaches them how to defend liberty. And they do that for you, too, through their free monthly digest of conservative thought. It's called Imprimis. 5.4 million Americans receive Imprimis for free every month. And you, my friend and fellow freedom lover, should be reading it too. You can subscribe for free at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com. There's no strings attached. Generous donors who want to preserve freedom for future generations make it possible for Hillsdale to send Imprimis to you for no cost every month. Start receiving and reading Imprimis so you can know how to defend the freedom you love. Go to levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com, levinforhillsdale.com.
It's Doc Washburn filling in for the great one, Mark Levin. Tuesday night, September 1st. I mentioned earlier in this hour how taken I was when I came across the YouTube video of the Howard Stern show from September 11th, 2001, and then I started watching other YouTube videos from that day. The Today Show, Good Morning America, Fox and Friends, and how serious and compelling the coverage was, because our way of life, our constitutional republic, was under attack. Well, you know what? When you have the 2016 Democrat presidential nominee saying the following, you realize that our system of government, our way of life, which relies on the peaceful transfer of power, is under attack again. I cannot stress this strongly enough. Here is Hillary Clinton.
So we've got to have a massive legal operation. I know the Biden campaign is working on that. We have to have poll workers, and I urge people who are able to be a poll worker. We have to have our own teams of people to counter the force of intimidation that the Republicans and Trump are going to put outside polling places. This is a big organizational challenge, but at least we know more about what they're going to do. And, Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances.
Wow.
Because I think this is going to drag out, and eventually I do believe he will win if we don't give an inch.
Yeah, she's saying, don't concede, we'll eventually steal it. Now, I got to say something. Have you ever been watching the television news and somebody says something and you start kind of fussing at the TV? I mean, even if it's somebody that 99% of the time you like what they say, and then you're like, oh, wait. So my confession, I love Harris Faulkner on Fox News. She is fantastic 99% of the time. She makes very compelling and cogent points 99% of the time. But when this video of Hillary saying Joe Biden should not concede came out the other day, Harris Faulkner saying, well, we got Hillary Clinton saying that Joe Biden should not concede on election night if it's close. And I'm like, no, Harris, that's not what she said. That's not what she said. No, not just on election night, not just if it's close. Here's what Hillary said.
Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances.
That's pretty widespread. Why? Because she says, give us enough time, we'll steal it.
I think this is going to drag out, and eventually I do believe he will win if we don't give an inch.
Pray for a landslide. I think we're going to get it. Pray for a landslide. I think we're going to get it. And that's no knock against Harris Faulkner. We all make mistakes. I think she's fantastic. Absolutely. Absolutely fantastic. All right, let me go with Sarah in Cleveland. Sarah, you are on the Mark Levin Show with Doc Washburn. Got about a minute and a half. Let's make it count. What you got?
I'm just very concerned about everyone and just how they're acting. Just to me, it seems a little childlike. That they're just resorting to everything that it has to do with race and not just looking at it as it is. Everything to them is just having that one mentality, I feel like. And so that it feels like I'm not, like as a conservative, me starting out my life and trying to find my job because I'm not even out of college yet, I'm afraid that if I even be on one side, that I'm going to either not get the job, I'm going to get silenced or something like that. Like I have that fear almost 75% of the time I go and meet new people, and I don't even tell them I'm conservative. I don't tell them I have people that I know from law enforcement because I'm afraid of what they're going to say about me. And it's been happening for a while.
I don't blame you. I'm wondering if you have thought about maybe relocating to a more conservative area, not to mention the weather's a lot nicer in the South. I know a lot of people who've moved down here from the Northeast or the Midwest and like, I don't want to go back. Has that ever crossed your mind?
It has, but I'm also broke, so I'm really moving.
And you probably have a lot of family in the Cleveland area, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just really hard for me to just get my voice out and just even say anything because I feel like I don't have the freedom of speech anymore because of all the stuff that's going on.
No, I don't blame you for feeling that way, Sarah, and I will be praying for you. We're up against the top of the hour news break, but I think a lot of things are going to change for the better after election night. God bless you. Thank you so much for calling in. Coming up, have we been played on the Chinese Communist coronavirus? There's some new stuff out there that you may not have heard about yet. Coming up right after the top of the hour. Doc Washburn for Mark Levin.
From the Westwood One Podcast Network.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hey, Doc Washburn filling in for the great one from his affiliate News Radio 1029 KARN in Little Rock, Arkansas. All right, now I want to see a show of hands. Who thinks that we may have been getting played to one extent or another on the Chinese Communist coronavirus? Well, I do. Now, early on, I was taking this very seriously. I followed the world coronavirus map and the map for the state I live in very closely. I stopped doing that when the New York Health Department announced they were going to count 3,500 deaths of people they hadn't actually tested, but they thought probably had COVID a few months ago. Then I noticed the CDC changed their website without telling anyone to say you can't really contract COVID from dry surfaces after all. And that's when I stopped wearing a mask to the grocery store. Well, until the governor of the state of Arkansas imposed a mask mandate. And that's also when I stopped spraying everything I brought home from the grocery store with a 70% alcohol solution. Because, again, I had been taking that very seriously. But the CDC did what they call a stealth edit. They changed their website without telling anyone to say you can't really contract COVID from dry surfaces after all. Hey, CDC, thanks so much for not telling 50 state governors. Then one of the top medical experts with the World Health Organization announced you can't really catch COVID from people who don't have symptoms after all. Then the videos came out from Dr. Fauci and the Surgeon General from way back in March, pleading with healthy people not to wear masks, a couple of months before they were pleading with healthy people to wear masks. Then the CDC director admitted that hospitals have a financial incentive to count deaths as COVID-related. Oh, what? Really? Then I read a remarkable article several weeks ago in the American Spectator called Questions for Dr. Fauci. It's an open letter from 3 MDs to Fauci, or as a great one affectionately refers to him, Anthony Tony Fauci. But the letter makes the irrefutable case that hydroxychloroquine works when given to patients within the first 5 to 7 days of the commencement of symptoms. As far as I can tell, Anthony Tony Fauci, Dr. Fauci has not responded. But have you heard the latest? I turn now to a gentleman who has been all over Fox News, a lot of mainstream media, a lot of radio talk shows recently. He's a much better public speaker than I will ever be. John MacArthur, pastor and best-selling author.
I haven't made really any comments about COVID or the lockdown and whatever else is going on in what is called a pandemic. I don't want to offer myself as any kind of an expert, but a rather telling report came out this week. And for the first time, we heard the truth. The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, which is the national organization, government organization that is to report to us the truth about disease, said that, in truth, 6% of the deaths that have occurred can be directly attributable to COVID. 94% cannot. Of the 160,000 people that have died, 9,210 actually died from COVID. There is no pandemic.
And at that point, the place erupted in applause. And he went on to say, we've been meeting together now for weeks and weeks and weeks. No masks, no socialist distancing. Yeah, socialist distancing. And nobody we know has it. Even though if what they're saying is true, then a lot of us should. So fewer than 10,000 people died from just COVID. According to the CDC. So, how's that different from the H1N1? I don't think it is. May I make a prediction? I predict President Donald J. Trump will fire Dr. Fauci November 4th. If Fauci and Birx were the experts we all thought they were, why did 40 governors shut down their states? Well, let me play you a little bit more audio from a different speaker now. Let me play for you what the great Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, said today about this whole mess.
We will never do any of these lockdowns again. And I hear people say they'll shut down the country. And honestly, I cringe because we know places that have done that.
When he says, I hear people say they'll shut down the country, he's talking about Biden. Biden's, oh, yeah, sure, yeah. Well, shut down the whole country. Yeah, I'll do that as president if that's what the science tells us. Is it time for my Jell-O pudding pops yet?
The most draconian lockdown in the world has been Peru, military enforced since March. They have the highest per capita mortality in the world from COVID.
Sounds great to Biden's handlers.
And at best, what a lockdown will do is delay. It does not reduce the ultimate mortality, but I think Dr. Alice would agree it creates a lot of other problems with mortality that a lot of people don't necessarily focus on. And so one of the things I've tried to stress in the last couple weeks in particular is COVID's important, but if you look, we have about 6% of our beds are filled with COVID-positive patients. All those individuals we care about, their families, everything, we need to be there for them. But out of 22 million people, we've got issues with people delaying cancer screenings, not coming in for heart or stroke. We've lost ground on the opioids since March.
But wait, that's not all. Not only do 94% of the people they say died from COVID-19 have an average of 2.6 other comorbidities, not only is the real number of people who only died from COVID-19 a little over 9,000, but now, over the weekend, even the New York Times finally admitted we have probably been testing for COVID all wrong, and 90% of our positives may actually be false. The New York Times admitted that over the weekend. Now, let me take you to an article from the great Stacey Lennox over at PJ Media entitled, "Finally, the CDC publishes COVID-19 testing guidance that makes sense." She says, it's good news when CNN and their bobbleheads are very upset. On Monday, that's Monday last week, the CDC updated its testing guidelines to say that not everyone needs to get a test for COVID-19. You only need a test if you have symptoms or have had close contact with an infected individual. They finally determined, the CDC, close contact, their definition is to be within 6 feet of an infected individual for at least 15 minutes. So why the masks? Direct quote from the CDC updated guidelines. If you do not have COVID-19 symptoms and have not had close contact with someone known to have a COVID-19 infection, you do not need to be tested. But wait, the CDC guidelines went even further. If you have been in close contact within 6 feet of a person with a COVID-19 infection for at least 15 minutes, but do not have symptoms, you do not necessarily need a test unless you are a vulnerable individual or your health care provider or state or public or local public health officials recommend you take one. So now, the CDC goes on to say that if you're not at high risk, you should monitor yourself for symptoms and get testing under the protocols for symptomatic individuals. This revision should bring an immediate end to screening protocols for employers, schools, and just about everywhere else. And though Dr. Leana Wen, former Planned Parenthood director, says this makes no sense, it's actually entirely consistent. Nordic countries have accelerated their opening and abandoned COVID-19 testing plans. On July 17, 2020, the CDC updated its guidelines to discourage retesting individuals who have recovered from COVID-19. This change was a research-based decision attributed to a greater understanding of how long a person remains infectious. Additionally, it highlighted one of the significant flaws in the PCR test used to detect the virus. And I had to look up the PCR, what that meant. It's a DNA test that gets really, 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 really specific. And in this case, maybe too specific. According to CDC guidance, if you take a test and test positive, you do not need to repeat a test Unless your illness required hospitalization, you can return to normal activities like work or school after the passage of 10 days from the onset of symptoms and 24 hours from when any fever has subsided on its own without the aid of any fever-reducing medications. Research the CDC cited has demonstrated that a person with symptoms is no longer infectious under these conditions. In order to be contagious, a person must be harboring viruses capable of replicating with a load significant enough to transmit the disease. These parameters appear to have been established to the CDC's satisfaction. Generally, the CDC has been quite conservative in its assessments, so the evidence must be substantial. So when the CDC advised against retesting, it specifically stated that the PCR test can amplify RNA from a virus no longer capable of replicating for 90 days post-recovery. It would be typical to find this in recovered patients after their immune system has defeated COVID-19. It can also be found in individuals who have never been infected by the virus. A positive test has never indicated an active infection or the ability to transmit the disease to others in the absence of symptoms. It could simply mean an individual has reactive T cells that eliminate COVID-19 through an exquisite and healthy immune response. This process may still leave viral debris in their airway that a PCR test can detect. So again, it looks like we've been testing it all wrong, and possibly 90% of the positives are false positives. I think it's time to open stuff up. Also time for me to go to a break. 877-381-3811. If you want to get into the conversation, I'm Doc Washburn, filling in for the great one, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin.
You know what I hate? Overpaying for something. We're already taxed to death. Then you pile on all the other services holding us hostage to high rates. Home internet, cable, utilities. Then there's your cell phone bill. AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. They all want to charge you for data you'll never need and so-called perks you'll never use. Thank goodness for Pure Talk USA. Because Pure Talk gives you the exact same coverage, same towers, same bars, but costs you half, with no contract and no excessive fees. Right now, enjoy unlimited talk, text, and 2 gigs of data, all for just $20 a month. The average person is saving $400 a year on their wireless bill. Go to puretalkusa.com and enter promo code Levin Podcast. When you do, you'll save $250 off any iPhone, including the brand new iPhone SE. That's puretalkusa.com, promo code Levin Podcast. That's Levin Podcast.
All right, Doc Washburn filling in for the great one, Mark Levin, from coast to coast. And if you got the CDC saying that we've been testing for the Chinese coronavirus all wrong, they don't call it that, but I do because I'm here to speak the truth. We've been testing for it all wrong. And the test is much too sensitive. And, you know, who knows? Maybe 90% of the positives have been false positives. If you got the CDC admitting finally that out of, what is it, like 180,000, they say, have now died from the Chinese communist coronavirus, only 9,200 of them didn't have any other comorbidities. We only know for sure that around 9,200 people actually died from COVID itself. Then why are we still wearing masks? I mean, it's just superstition at this point, right? You got the CDC itself saying no need for you to even be tested unless you were within 6 feet of somebody symptomatic with the coronavirus for more than 15 minutes. How many of us would do that? This is getting ridiculous. It's getting absolutely ridiculous. All right, 877-381-3811. Let me go to John, Dr. John in Ocala, Florida. Dr. John, we got a couple of minutes until the bottom of the hour break. Let's make it count, brother. What you got?
I'll tell you what, I've been taking care of COVID patients from day one here in Central Florida. You're right on with everything you've said. We had patients languishing in the hospitals who had fully recovered, who kept testing positive, because as the CDC said, they're going to continue to test positive. They're not contagious, all right? We've also had I signed death certificates, and yes, we're putting influenza, we're putting pneumonia, and if you put any of that down as a cause of death, you know, it's insinuated that it's COVID-19. That's the CDC told us to do that with nursing home patients. You know, it's presumed COVID-19. So a lot of these deaths would have been other viral illnesses or causes of pneumonia, but they've been attributed to COVID-19. And lastly, I got to tell you that the treatment of nursing home patients in this country has been abominable during this era. You know, they've been languishing. Doctors aren't visiting them. There's been ways, even when they got COVID-19, to prevent the progression of their symptoms. They have not been getting hydroxychloroquine. They've been not getting vitamin C. I can go on and on, but I do know.
Okay, I got to ask something before I run out of time here, Dr. John Ocala, Florida. Have you tried talking to your state senator, your state representative? Because it sounds like the kind of thing that Governor DeSantis would want to know about and do something about.
Well, Governor DeSantis called me when he heard I was one of the few doctors who told my patients they don't have to wear masks everywhere, and I wrote about it. So, yeah, he's a great guy. This nursing home care, I am just beginning to write about and talk about. You're the first person I've called after this 96-year-old patient of mine came in after 2 weeks of symptoms in nursing home, and he died yesterday. And honestly, even at 96, he could have survived from COVID had he been treated in the nursing home in the early stages.
Wow.
Nursing homes are becoming death camps in this. They had over the last 6 months become death camps.
Dr. John, I got to run to it, but please send me some of that info. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Thank you very much. More of your calls coming up at 877-381-3811. Doc Washburn filling in for the great one, Mark Levin.
So I've been watching these riots around the country. I'm absolutely sickened. I'm sure most of you are. You know, John Locke once said, law is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom. Where there's no law, there's no freedom. You want to let rioters burn down your cities? There goes your freedom. You want to get rid of cops? There goes your freedom. You want to elect Joe Biden? There goes your freedom. As you've heard me say many times, I have a liberty agenda. And at Levin TV, which airs on Blaze TV, you can watch this come to life with our conservative, pro-American content that reveres our Constitution and champions our individual freedoms. This is what we do each and every day. And there's never been a better time to check us out. Just go to levintv.com, LEVIN-TV.com, and sign up today for a free 30-day trial. That's right, we're going to give you a full month of Levin TV and all the other great shows on Blaze TV at no cost to you, but only if you subscribe right now at levintv.com.
Mark Levin, radio's principled patriot. Call in now at 877-381-3811.
Hey, Doc Washburn filling in for the great one, Mark Levin, from his affiliate in Little Rock, Arkansas, News Radio 1029 KRN. So, turns out, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi visited a San Francisco hair salon yesterday afternoon for a wash and a blowout, despite local ordinances, and she didn't wear a mask. She didn't wear a mask, Nancy Pelosi, and you know what? It's a scam. Nancy Pelosi is 80 years old. Now, I don't know if her rumored love of alcohol would be an underlying condition. I don't know if the thing with the dentures is a comorbidity. I don't know, but she doesn't believe any of this. Because if she did, she would not have gone to that hair salon yesterday with no mask on. The stylist is wearing a mask. Andrew Cuomo, there's a picture of him out yesterday in public without a mask. Remember, Nancy Pelosi was the one who said that Trump slapped science right in the face because there were some people in the crowd of the RNC that weren't wearing a mask? Remember that? Yeah. Yeah. The only reason they're still making us wear masks, and this goes for the governor of Arkansas, Republican Asa Hutchinson, as much as anybody else, I believe is because they like power. Yeah. And there is a state legislator in Arkansas, a guy named Dan Sullivan, who is suing over that, the fact that the governor did not consult the legislature. Because, we got these, laws on the books. Unbelievable. Unfreaking believable. All right, 877-381-3811. Let me go to Kay in Missoula, Montana. Kay, you are on the Mark Levin Show with Doc Washburn filling in.
Hello. I'm happy to say that I'm actually from Kalispell, Montana, but nobody knows where Kalispell is, and they know where Missoula is.
Well, I've heard of Kalispell, but I'd have to kind of look on the map.
It's up by Glacier National Park, one of the most beautiful places, I think, in the world.
Especially this time of year.
Oh, my gosh, yes. It is just, you go up there, and I went up there a week ago, and it is just absolutely gorgeous. Okay, my question is, I'm a registered nurse, and one of the nurses' aides that I work with apparently tested positive for China virus.
Yeah.
And because I was within 6 feet of her for more than 15 minutes, I guess, I needed to be quarantined until I could have a negative China virus test.
Okay.
And my employer called me Friday afternoon and said, you have to leave work, you can't see any more patients, I'm a home health nurse,
Yeah.
and you need to go get tested or quarantine until September 5th, which was 14 days after my exposure.
Wow.
And this call I got was a few days after that, so that I was almost in the middle of the 14 days.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was tested, and I knew I was negative. I'm negative. Now, if they test me tomorrow, I might be positive. Who knows? But I have a negative result here from my employer.
Right.
So I can go back to work. Except now I have to go in the morning and be fitted for an N95 mask.
Okay,
because
great.
those little blue surgical masks are not effective.
Wow.
Huh. Yeah.
So the kind of masks that they want the rest of us to wear aren't really effective.
Nope. You need an N95. But they're reserving those for medical people. Okay. So my thoughts about this were, they're talking about this surge in China virus cases, positives, and I'm wondering, you're positive until presumed negative, or you're presumed positive until you test negative. So when the states get the numbers to go into who's tested or who's positive and stuff, because I was presumed positive, am I counted in that surge of coronavirus, even though I never had it?
I would guess you probably were.
That's
now,
what I'm...
What do you think when you hear that the CDC is admitting some things like the what is it called, the PCR test? Is that the which is way too sensitive? I think that's what they call it, PCR. And so like 90% of the positives may have been negative. I mean, yeah, the PCR test. What do you think when you hear something like that, or when you hear something like, fewer than 10,000 of the deaths have been from COVID only? Yeah, the polymerase chain reaction, the PCR test, to get down the DNA is way too sensitive. Do you hear these things and go, okay, wait a minute, so we've been doing this wrong all this time? I mean, you'd have a better beat on this than I would as a healthcare professional yourself. What do you think?
I think we've been doing it wrong. I've thought all along we've been doing it wrong. Why are we testing people that are asymptomatic? Early this summer, I worked for the county as a nurse that was testing people for the China virus, but they had to be asymptomatic. They couldn't have any symptoms. If they had symptoms, we told them they had to go to their doctor.
And now the CDC is going, well, if you don't have symptoms, no big deal. Yeah. And we're all supposed to just pretend that the emperor is wearing clothes, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I had a mask, and I tend to get a little, I don't know what you want to call it, not nice, I guess. But I had one of the blue masks that we're required to wear.
Yeah.
And our governor his last name is Bullock, and I wrote on the front of my mask, because I'd heard somebody say this, and I thought, that sounds good. I wrote Bullock Burqa on it. Because the governor came out July 15th. I would happen to be at work that day, and said everybody had to start wearing a mask out in public now.
Yeah. Well, see, your governor there in Montana actually identifies as a Democrat. Sometimes I think our governor in Arkansas just acts like a Democrat. So is there any possibility of talking to your state senator, your state representative, and saying, hey, what's the deal here? This is ridiculous, and providing that person with some information?
Well, that's a good idea. I never thought of that.
Yeah, because, I mean, I don't know if in Kalispell or in Missoula, either one, you got a Republican or a Democrat. I have no idea. But, like I said earlier, the Republican state rep who just got elected to state senate here, Dan Sullivan in Arkansas, is actually mounting a lawsuit against the governor because he says you don't have the statutory authority to do what you're doing without the approval of the legislature by state law. And I'm wondering if it would be the same thing in Montana. You might want to, contact your state senator and your state representative and find out. But either way, I mean, a great call, and I appreciate your call, Kay. God bless you. Thank you very much. All right, 877-381-3811. Let me go to Marie in Palm Springs, California. You're on the Mark Levin Show. Doc Washburn filling in. What's up, Marie?
I love your show.
Thank you.
This show kind of really reactivated. I went to law school. I'm an investigator, working part-time. Everybody's got to do. We just lost a friend. And our friend had COPD. He was way older, in chronic bronchitis. People who smoke. He stayed away from everybody. But he died in his house. And he was so terrified to go see his doctor.
Oh, my.
And I'm wondering how many other elders or people are doing this because of the financial incentive to your point with the testing with the CDC. What changed it? And people don't realize that if you actually go back, and Mark Levin really got me way back when with just details and investigation. This is a repeat of Fauci's with AIDS. Look up the PCR test back in 1980 when AIDS was the epidemic. Okay, I had a cousin that died from AIDS, and he was giving all of this, and he was whistleblowing, and to this day we still think he got killed.
Oh, my.
This is intentional infliction of emotional abuse. When people wear the mask, if you go back into the history of it, it's a format of submission. We know that a lot of these masks don't work. Unfortunately, I live in a state where it's loaded with Democratic senators, They won't listen to you because they just want the money. They're too busy starting fires in order to get more federal money because they can't balance a checkbook. And I thank God for Trump every day that he did the money the way he did, because we would have never gotten it. There's people still starving and struggling and waiting. And there's people that are terrified. And it's like for the Democrats to think that they can do this by force when all people have to do is go to the Antifa website, and it's a fundraiser for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris's husband represents pharmaceutical industries that are heavily delved in vaccines.
What does it tell you? What does it tell you, Marie, when you can pack a church for the funeral of George Floyd or John Lewis or Elijah Cummings, but people aren't allowed to go see their own grandmother in the nursing home? I mean, it's just so wrong. It's just so wrong. Marie, God bless you. I'm sorry for your loss, and I appreciate your call. Thank you very much. More of your calls coming up at the 877-381-3811 as we continue to do our best to speak the truth to power. And before I go to the break, I gotta mention, several months ago, I heard one of the most heartbreaking phone calls when a nursing home operator in the great state of New York called Mark Levin on this very radio program and said, "We have been begging Governor Cuomo and the health department, please don't send COVID-positive patients to our nursing home. You're going to get people killed, and they won't even respond to us." And now, the DOJ, the Justice Department, wants all the records from states like New York that did that. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Pray for the re-election of Donald J. Trump. All right, 877-381-3811. Doc Washburn continuing, filling in for the great one, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin.
You know what I hate? Overpaying for something. We're already taxed to death. Then you pile on all the other services holding us hostage to high rates. Home internet, cable, utilities. Then there's your cell phone bill. AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. They all want to charge you for data you'll never need and so-called perks you'll never use. Thank goodness for Pure Talk USA. Because Pure Talk gives you the exact same coverage, same towers, same bars, but costs you half with no contract and no excessive fees. Right now, enjoy unlimited talk, text, and 2 gigs of data, all for just $20 a month. The average person is saving $400 a year on their wireless bill. Go to puretalkusa.com, enter promo code Levin Podcast. When you do, you'll save $250 off any iPhone, including the brand new iPhone SE. That's puretalkusa.com, promo code Levin Podcast. That's Levin Podcast.
All right, Doc Washburn filling in for the great one, Mark Levin, at Little Rock, Arkansas. So, were Dr. Fauci and the Surgeon General lying in March when they say you don't have to wear masks if you don't have symptoms? Or are they lying now saying you gotta wear masks? Are they ignoring the CDC saying, well, you know, you're not really in danger unless you're within 6 feet of somebody who has it and is symptomatic for more than 15 minutes. Are they just ignoring all this? Who's paying attention? I'm trying to. 877-381-3811. Let's go to Rob in one of the original subdivisions in the country, Levittown, New York. Rob, you're on the Mark Levin Show. Doc Washburn filling in. What's up, sir?
Hey, Doc, how are you? You know, I just want to talk to people as the average healthy American. I'm 30, so I wouldn't consider myself too young, but, you know, I'm pretty young. I didn't buy this thing from the beginning, but I followed the rules. I played their game. And then about 2 months into the China virus, I said, the hell with this mask. The hell with social distancing.
Yeah.
You know, and I washed my hands like a normal, sanitary human being would before you eat, after you go to the bathroom.
Sure.
You know, I didn't go crazy. And I think this just proves to most people what they need to understand is we have this thing called an immune system. We are designed to fight viruses.
Right.
I mean, I don't know where this crazy idea came that if we don't all wear masks, we're putting everybody at risk. This fear that's being driven by the left-wing media, it has really gotten to people, and I'm talking people that I would never imagine would be walking around cowering down to Cuomo in a mask.
Really? Because obviously there is a built-in subgroup of people in New York who wish he'd never gotten elected governor. I mean, is that kind of folks you're talking about, Rob?
Well, and the 11,000 poor families, and, you know, I'm sure that number is higher, but, you know, who had to deal with their loved ones being killed by a governor's mismanagement of the virus, and then somehow he turns around and blames the federal government. It's really amazing to me.
Yeah, when he forced all those people in those nursing homes, and Janice Dean lost her father-in-law and mother-in-law. She's a meteorologist over at Fox News, and she just retweeted something out there on Twitter about how the state is fighting Freedom of Information Act requests to find out more info on that. But, you know, CNN, the whole mainstream media are acting like Andrew Cuomo is some kind of hero. And to me, he's got the blood of, like you say, 11,000 people on his hands. They're trying to blame